Oh God, what have I made? Nobody will want this stuff.
Oh wow, NotJah, is this your Teespring store?
Yeah, I just threw some simple, silly designs together quick. It's nothing special, just some funny, overpriced things on NotJah's underworld market.
Oh, look at this. This is super cool. You can get a hoodie and many other style of shirts.
Not just shirts, but some great Yowie design stretch pants too.
And who wouldn't like an awesome coffee mug?
Or an angry nacho throw pillow for your couch. Everyone wants one of those.
Payment online is the best way to pay you.
Well heck, Jen, thanks. Here's all your awesome nacho merch.
Check out NotJah's Underworld Market on Teespring today.
G'day everyone, NotJah here for another Atheist Flashbacks. Tonight we're with Danger Hissy. G'day.
Hey.
You wanna tell us real quick, or tell the audience real quick who you are, where to find you, and what religion you used to be?
Yep, I am Danger Hissy. I'm over at Hissy's Hideaway. I'm also on Twitter as Danger Hissy. I write fan fiction as Hissy the Danger Noodle. Dead Dove Do Not Eat on those ones. And if you want to find me on any social media, you'll find it pinned at the top of my Twitter. Just find me from there. And I was born and raised Catholic. Deeply Roman Catholic.
Nice. Alright, I'm sure by now everyone should know the way the game works. We take our guests through a bunch of questions as their old dear self, and if they break character, we all take a drink. It can be alcohol, it can be not alcohol, it doesn't really matter, but alcohol is always more fun. So the first question is, what are you drinking tonight?
I'm currently drinking a mixture of energy drink and Jameson. I only have half a bottle though, so I'm wondering if that's going to be enough.
Yeah, we should be alright.
So should be alright.
I unfortunately only have Coca-Cola because it's still early in the morning. Although, after what's just transpired, I really do want a beer.
Fair enough, can't argue with that. Maybe wait until after midday and then you can be a pirate and not an alcoholic.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's the rule, isn't it?
I'll go with it. I always normally go, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. But
yeah.
That's too much like Jimmy Buffett. Alright. Okay, so we'll get into the game. You ready to be your old Catholic self?
I'll try.
Okay,
old Catholic me was like 12 years old though, so, you know. Be gentle. She's fragile.
Well, maybe not for yourself then, because you've been too young, but does your religion allow your patrons to drink? Patrons, you're the adults of the church to drink.
Yeah. It's not a good christening, wedding, or funeral without a good drink.
Fair call. Do they go wild? Do they like Catholics going wild?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, you ain't seen a party until you've been to one of our family weddings or family funerals.
Fair call. Okay, so bring the booze. And I know you did mention this just before, how you were born in, pretty much anyway, like you were raised into the religion?
Yeah, mum and dad both Catholic. Dad's Polish. So Catholic kind of comes with the territory.
Okay, very cool. How regular do you attend church?
Once a week at school. School does a midweek mass on a Wednesday lunchtime.
And so it's a Catholic school then?
Yeah, Catholic school all the way through, primary school, secondary school.
Okay. That would be religion would be a very strong factor then in your upbringing.
At school, definitely, yeah. Not so much at home.
Oh, okay.
Parents don't really take me to church as such. They did when I was doing my first communion, but otherwise not really. Mum plays a lot of religious music at home, but that's about it. They kind of leave me to it.
Well, what's your favourite part of either church or going to Catholic school?
I'm sorry, I can't. The end of Mass. Yeah, Mass is a long and boring. The most interesting part of religion. Yeah, is my mum's music on a Sunday morning. She just blasts out like these, like old American gospel songs, like Johnny Cash and stuff.
See,
it's not even Catholic, but she blasts them out, so it's nice.
Well, like the older Elvis Gospels and stuff as well, or
yeah, like Elvis singing the gospel songs, like Dolly Parton, stuff like that.
Yeah.
She's got this album called Peace in the Valley with them all on, that she just plays constantly.
Admittedly, that's some good music. Religious or not, that's still good music.
It is.
Yeah. That's not too bad. Okay, so I want to go through a bit of like what the beliefs are, and how like every different denomination will have a different interpretation of the Bible books and the stories. So I want to go through a few of those. What would you say, or how would you describe your belief at the beginning and the Genesis story of for a Catholic?
I mean, it is what it is. God created the world in. It's one of those stories where I don't believe that literally, or I don't believe it's 7 days in the way we see 7 days. So I asked my teacher about this because I'd heard about these like weird Americans who thought the world was literally made in 7 days. I'm just like, but we're learning about evolution and stuff in science class, so that can't be right. And my teacher said it's like, so have you seen The Matrix?
Of course, it was filmed here.
Yeah, cool. You know the bullet time, like where everything slows right down?
Yep.
That's kind of how time runs for God. So what's a minute for us could be like what we call like 1,000 years could be for God.
Yeah.
So 7 days for God could be millions of years. And that's how the universe got created and why it fits.
Okay, so definitely not a young Earth creationist.
No.
That's a good start. There's a bit of science literacy there, which is always important.
My school's a science school, so I hope so.
Very cool. What about Adam and Eve? The story of Adam and Eve, and they have what is it? Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel, if I recall correctly, and then he gets banished. This is after they've already been kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and then Cain goes off and makes a whole new family. Do you have any explanation of how that happened?
Yeah, again, this is another one I asked my RE teacher, and she said that the story of Adam and Eve is only the one story that was written down. So you've got Adam and Eve in the garden, but the garden, if you imagine, is the whole world, or was a massive part of the world at that point. So there could have been kind of, another family off screen that God was talking to as well. And like people over there and there. And I mean, for all we know, those families are still in the Garden of Eden, and it's Adam and Eve who fell out, and that's the story we hear.
That's fair enough. Okay. But basically, so there are potentially other...
Yeah, I mean, there's that as a thing, or you could maybe God created him a family. Because, I mean, he killed his brother, but can you imagine living your entire life all on your own? Like,
well,
wow.
Yeah, that'd be pretty bad.
Yeah.
Less sympathy with murderers. What about the story of the global flood of Noah's time? Now, a lot of denominations believe that this is a literal global flood. Is that the way you interpret it?
I've never had any reason to think it wasn't. The whole world flooded. The animals moved in 2 by 2. Hurrah! And then Noah sent out a dove, and when it found land, he went towards it, and off it went.
And that is all of the animals on Earth that got onto that little boat.
I mean, I suppose it would have to be. I don't think it was like a little rowing boat or anything. I think it must have been something huge, like the Titanic or something.
That's fair. That's a
maybe
fair
even
assumption.
bigger. So.
Have you ever heard of any of the evidence that shows that building a wooden boat to such a degree as described in the Bible is impossible?
Yeah, well, the people who are trying that now don't have God telling them how to do it.
Okay. So that was with God's superior knowledge.
Yeah, sorry. I can't believe that just came out of my mouth. Oh, I'm sorry about wow.
Yeah, no, I've been there though.
God's a master shipbuilder. Yeah, cool. Being a classicist now, I'm like, I wonder if he got his designs from the Phoenicians. Oh, like, wow. I really wasn't educated on the science behind any of these stories. I don't think I was ever even raised to question them. Wow. Okay. Round 1.
Alrighty. Okay, we'll move on from Noah, I suppose. We'll go into the Exodus. We've got the Exodus from Egypt with the Israelites. First place I like to start is do you believe that they were slaves? The Israelites, of course.
Yeah, why wouldn't they be?
Fair enough. Well, because there has been a lot of evidence to support the idea that there were no slaves working in Egypt.
But if they weren't slaves, why would they try and run?
It's a very good
Why
question.
would they have an issue with Pharaoh?
That's a question for the ages, I suppose. What about with the 10 plagues themselves? They are the literal plagues that ravished the nation of Egypt. Ravished?
Yeah,
Is that the right
there's
word? Ravaged. I needed a j.
Ravaged.
Yeah.
Ravaged. Not ravished.
Yeah, that's
not a word we should be using when talking about religion. I'd say so. I mean, there's like scientific evidence of them happening. I think I've heard that. And, if you really want to mess up someone's country, you send plagues and locusts and,
And what about the last one, where we are seeing the death of babies, children, for the sins of one man?
Well, I mean, that one man was the head of that country. It was his responsibility to keep that country safe and to keep those people safe.
And he got to live.
Yes, but he got his son taken away, which is arguably worse.
It wasn't even just his son, though, was it?
Well, then...
It was a lot of random people that were very innocent, probably knew nothing about this, that lost their sons as well.
Oh, then they shouldn't follow a guy who doesn't listen and enslaves people for hundreds of years.
Would you say that they were in a position of power to make any decisions about that?
Well, if they'd have all got together, they could have brought him down. Like, he was clearly not a good leader to be doing that to people, so...
What was it that he did to people?
Well, he enslaved an entire race. You know, the
Okay.
stories are that the Israelites practically built all the pyramids and all the temples and stuff in Egypt and treated them like garbage. You must have seen the cartoons of Joseph and the other one.
Oh, what's that? Prince of Egypt?
Prince of Egypt, that's the one.
It's a great movie. I still love that movie.
Me too.
Yeah, no, fair call. I believe that I wouldn't necessarily use a cartoon as my basis of belief, or even as an example, but fair enough.
No, but it shows you what it would have been like. It's based off the story, so it's what it would have been like for slaves. So yeah, I mean, slavery is nasty, and he did that to an entire group of people.
Fair enough. And so they're all fled. They got out of Egypt after crossing the Red Sea. Is that something that you know how like God parts the waters? Is that a literal story? Just God's power?
Yeah, I don't see why God couldn't be that powerful. He'd already done all this other stuff, and you know they have things like tsunamis and stuff that it could be. And you know, there's nothing to say God didn't, if you like, flick the switch on a tsunami that did that, or something like that. Just because it's a natural thing, like an earthquake or a volcano, tsunami, whatever it is, doesn't mean that God's not the one who put, like, if you like, pushed the button or made the decision to make that happen.
Yeah.
Or set that in motion in some way.
Fair call. So we've got, you know, a bit of God's powers at least influencing the world that he created, so that it makes sense.
I can't. Please bear in mind, I'm talking like I'm 12 years old. Please bear that in mind, and please don't judge me too harshly. This is horrible. Some of the things coming out of my mouth. I do not condone murdering an entire culture's firstborn. I promise.
No, of course. That's kind of it's part of the game.
Wow.
Realizing the person that, you know, who we used to be.
That was horrible.
And the sort of people that we run into today who still are this way, it gives us a way to see them in a more optimistic light. Like we don't always have to think they're no hope or they're lost.
I mean, the thing is, I know Catholics now who don't think like this, so I don't know where I got most of it from.
Well, I think a lot of it is also because when you're younger, you get told things in a more simplified manner, and so you have more room to interpret it your own way, a little more freer and a little more in a creative way, which dullens the seriousness of everything, and ability to be accurate as well.
Yeah, a lot of it I would have just filled in the gaps with my own imagination.
Yeah, and it's the same here. Right. All right.
Cool.
I normally ask about Jonah next. Do you know much about the story of Jonah and the big fish or the whale or whatever?
I know there was a big whale and I think it ate him and then he survived somehow, but I don't really know the story at all. I know the name and that's about it. I probably heard it once when I was really young and then maybe drew a cartoon of it in class and that was about it. I don't remember much.
Well, the idea behind that one is that he survives within this big sea creature for 3 days, and then is spat out and is alive, basically. That's the general gist of the context of the story. And I'm wondering if you had any opinion on whether that would be something you'd take as a literal story or maybe metaphorical or like an analogy.
An analogy. I don't know. At 12 years old, I'd have probably just gone, yeah, it's literal. God must have protected him.
Yeah, fair call. And that's often the way people
Although
justify.
It strikes me now that biblical figures tend to always go through things that last for 3 days before they quote-unquote rise from the dead.
Oh, yeah. there's a lot of common numbers that occur in the Bible like that.
3, 7.
3, 10, 7.
Yeah.
12. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll move on. Are you familiar with the story of Job?
Vaguely, I think.
He's the guy where basically Job is a terribly faithful man to God, and he has all this lovely wealth and a beautiful family and lots of land and livestock, thanks to his faithfulness to God. God has blessed him so. And Satan, the devil, comes along and says, "Hey, look, God, I reckon he wouldn't be faithful to you if you weren't so generous to him. You know, you take away everything he has and he'll renounce you." And God's like, "All right, you're on, mate." And so basically, not only is God betting on this man's life, but he also then takes away everything he owns, all his land, livestock, his reputation. He kills his family. But Job stays faithful. And so Satan concedes, and God creates a new, gives him new livestock, new land, all the good things back, and a new family. And so normally I'd ask, like, how would you justify something like that, especially considering the old family never got to come back? Like, that was the end.
I mean, justifying it in general is you have faith. You know, no matter how bad things get, have faith, and God will look after you. That's the whole point. That is what being Catholic is. As for his family, if they had faith, they'd have gone to heaven. So it's not really like, they died, but they went to heaven.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
fair enough.
We'd hope they did. I hope so.
You would hope so. Yes, that would be definitely better than, "Oh no, that was just you dead now."
Yeah.
God, I hope that's not a real story. Like,
actually, yeah, like terrible story.
All the God and Satan betting stuff, like, that could be disregarded. Some guy going through that sort of an event would just be pretty tragic. Like, oh goodness.
Yeah.
But anyway, move on to the Gospels. Everybody's favorite. We all love Jesus. Yeah, I think everybody loves Jesus.
Except those few guys, those random guys from the temple. They weren't keen on him.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Okay. Well, so being a good Catholic, I take it the story of the Gospels are absolute truth. Jesus was a real man.
Jesus existed. Jesus was a real man. The Gospels are all telling the story from different points of view, so they're going to be slightly different. It's like, we're talking now. I will tell this story different to how you'll tell it, but it happened. And so the Gospels are telling it all from different points of view, but Jesus is there in all of them.
Mm-hmm. And so these different points of view, they're written by some of the apostles. I take it then that they were contemporaries of Jesus. They were alive at the same time.
Yeah, so like St. Peter couldn't read and write, but he told the story to someone who could, and that was Mark. So that's Mark's story. I'm not quite sure about the other ones, but that's one example of. So Mark's gospel is Peter's account, St. Peter's account of Jesus.
Yeah. And what comes after that? Okay, so then you've got the resurrection of Jesus. How does that work in? Is that it's 3 days dead and then he comes back? Does he come back as himself when he's resurrected?
Yeah, he comes back as himself. He's, there's a touch more of sort of the Trinity and God in the Trinity about him, but he's still himself. I mean, if he wasn't himself, they wouldn't have recognized him, even after he told them who he was and they saw him break the bread. So it must have been himself.
Because that was one I always, I don't know, I never quite got, well, back then anyway, how he was unrecognizable and then he was recognizable, and that, how did he come back as like a dead guy, like the dead, when your body dies sort of thing, it goes through a certain process of decomposition. Is that why he was unrecognizable? I've actually heard some people using that as that's what they believe, which has been very interesting. Yes,
I don't think I'd want to eat a meal with like a guy who'd been dead for 3 days at the table. So I hope not. I hope that's not how that went. But I find it a bit hard to believe Jesus would have decomposed anyway. I mean, one of the criteria for being a saint is that your body doesn't decompose. There's a whole thing about there's a lot of Greek saints because the Greek islands are so small. When you get buried there, you only get buried for a certain amount of time. I think it's like 3 years or 5 years, someone told me. So when they dig the bodies up, if they haven't decomposed, it's one of the signs that they could be a saint, because saints don't decompose. The body doesn't decompose.
That's interesting.
So
I'm actually curious now. Like, I wonder if you put a different person in the same grave, if they have a similar level of decomposition. I'm probably thinking too far into it now.
I think the thing the Greeks do, they dig them up after like 3 years, and if they've not decomposed, they put them back down for another 3 years, and then bring them up again and keep checking.
Oh, okay.
Because there's one, I think it's Saint Denis, because we went to Greece when I was younger, and they dug him up about 5 times before they realised he wasn't rotting away. And then they put him in a church and built a massive church around him and stuff.
I think Papa wants to go again. All right, give me a second, buddy. I'll be there. Okay. Well, I think I've asked the questions I needed on the Jeebus character. We'll move on to Revelations. Do you know much about the Book of Revelations? If you'll give me a second, like while you answer, I'll just let my papa out as well.
Second coming of Jesus, end of the world, the good and the bad separated, the sheep and the goat story. Something about like trumpets and angels and war and famine and 4 horsemen, all that. Never really focused on it. Just know that one day Jesus is going to come back and sort everyone out, and you get one last chance to decide whether you believe or not. And if you don't, you go to hell forever. Kind of it.
I managed to miss all of that, I'm sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, just kind of explaining.
What was in Revelations. Yeah. Is the rapture something that happens? Like, explain a bit of what happens at the rapture, if that's something that you believe.
See, I've never, that word was never used.
Okay.
But there is this idea that one day Jesus will come back and sort everyone out, and the good people will go to heaven and the bad people will go to hell. And that will be the end of it. That will be like the end of it. And there will be heaven on earth because only the good people will be left.
Very
and
cool.
Jesus will be back, so all will be good.
And so that comes back to a physical earth, does it? So it's like heaven on earth, but is it a physical earth, or does the earth turn into heaven, basically?
So the earth, it's the Our Father. It's on earth as it is in heaven. So earth will become heaven.
Yeah. Okay, that'll be pretty cool. Okay. Well, we'll move off of Revelations. There's only so much I can really pick that apart. What would you say your favourite, either book of the Bible or Bible story would be, or parable?
The feeding of the 5,000. But it's for kind of a weird reason. So I like that story because of the way it was explained to me and what it means. So if you know the story, Jesus is preaching out in like the middle of nowhere because there's so many people. He had to go out, and because he wasn't really welcome to be preaching in the town centre. Went out in the middle of nowhere, and these sort of 5,000 people followed him, and none of them had any food or water to drink, or they didn't seem to, and they were hungry and they needed food, and they had nothing. So Jesus said, ask around, ask who's got. And from these 5,000 people, they basically scrounged up 5 loaves and 2 fish.
Yeah.
Is it 2 fish and 5 loaves? No, 5 loaves and 2 fish. And Jesus blessed it and broke the bread and said, start to share it out. And the disciples couldn't believe this. This is not going to go around everyone. Have you lost your mind? The disciples didn't believe. They didn't have the faith. But at the end of it, there's baskets and baskets of food left over.
And so the idea is that, if I'm understanding correctly, is that it's not so much a overt, crazy miracle in the typical sense, but more of that it was having faith that they had enough amongst themselves already, and they just sort of pulled it all together, and voila, they had enough.
Well, there's 2 ways of reading that. There's the very simple way of Jesus made more food, which I don't particularly like. What I like is the reading of it that says, when they went around and asked, or when they started sharing the food, people realised, oh, I actually have some in my pocket, and started adding to it. And then as they added to it, it became that everyone could take enough to eat because everyone was adding what they'd actually brought with them. And there was enough to share for everyone with food left over. And the idea is that the miracle is the kindness of strangers to each other and the willingness of people to share.
Okay.
So it's a little thing, but it's nice.
That's fair enough. Flip side of that is, what's your least favorite, either story or book of the Bible?
Definitely when Jesus arrives at the temple and finds everyone trading. That it just makes me angry at the complete disrespect for the temple. And I don't know if it's a Jewish thing, why they thought that was okay, but why would you take your one place for God and open up a market stall in there or start trading stuff and selling? Like, this is why I don't get certain Christians do it. They hold like tombolas and bun sales and stuff in actual church buildings. Not like outside or in the local school hall next to it, but in the church. And no. In the church, in the tabernacle at the back is where the body of Christ is. You show respect for that building. And it's just, it makes me so mad because I see that there's certain Christians who still do it. And I just have some respect.
Yeah.
Like, even if you don't believe, why would you do that?
It's like a simple concept that I've always thought of to be sort of like the Sabbath. God has this one little day, the rest you can do all your work, but leave that one day for Him. It's like the churches, the tabernacle back in the day especially, it was the central place for everybody to go. Yeah. It wasn't like these days where your town might have 20 or so different types of churches for all the different denominations. Whereas back then that was the one place that was for God. Everywhere else you could do all your sales, selling and buying and all that sort of trading. But that one building was just for God. Don't do it in that building. And I sort of see it in a similar way as that, where it's like He's not asking for a lot. It's just like that one little section. Do it everywhere else. You've got 99% of the town you can do it. But
Yeah, exactly. And it's like you were talking about the Sabbath. There's 7 days in a week. He's only asking for one.
Yeah.
He's only really asking for your Sunday morning for 3 hours. Sometimes not even that, depending on how long your priest talks for. So, I'm sorry, I can't. I'm sorry. Sorry, I can't. because I know how pervasive Catholicism gets and how it takes over your entire world and not just one day or one little part of you. Yeah, I can't.
true.
I'm sorry. Or I know how pervasive it got with me. I used to give up my school lunch breaks to go to mass because I was that kid. So, you know, and then the days when there weren't mass, I was going up and like doing stuff and wow. So yeah, it's not like that at all. It can be, I suppose, if you want it to be, but wow. Yeah, sorry, I need a drink.
That's all right. Well, we'll go on to the next question. What does your God consider to be good, or what would you have to do to, get into heaven, so to speak, like to live a good life in His eyes?
Well, go on, let me get back into character. Well, you've got to believe and you've got to be good. Follow your 10 commandments and be good, and don't hurt other people or do anything too terrible. It's all there. It's just, Jesus said, love thy neighbor.
Yeah, that's fair enough. It's pretty simple. Well, what about on the other side? What would be an unforgivable sin?
See, this one's hard because we did this in school and they showed us two examples, and the teacher said, God can forgive anything. And I said, well, like I said, my dad's Polish, and I said, well, what about Hitler? And she said, even Hitler, even in that moment, even after he's killed himself and murdered all those people, if he truly repents, and God knows he truly repents, God will forgive him. And then they showed us the example of Myra Hindley, one of the Moors murderers, who helped kidnap and torture and like really badly torture kids, who turned Catholic in prison. And apparently she's just forgiven and it's all okay. But still can't find some of those bodies because she hasn't told them where they are. So, and it's...
How, I suppose, God would be the one that's forgiving her, and so she wouldn't have to tell the authorities where the bodies are. She'd just have to ask for forgiveness for them all by God. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's why I'm not God, because I couldn't forgive something like that. When I go to confession and I say I've done something wrong, I have to pay a penance and put it right. I have to give a penance and put it right. So should she. You don't get out of it. And the least she could do is tell those families where the babies are so they could have a proper funeral.
And have closure.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, most of them have had to bury empty boxes. Yeah. I mean, the stories from like the 70s and the 80s of the police getting so desperate to find the bodies, they hired psychics to try and find the bodies up on the moors and stuff. It was horrible. Like before my time, but I've heard the stories and it's horrible. And to think someone like that and the things they were doing to those kids as well, it's awful. That's why I'm not good, because maybe I should pray about that, but I can't forgive that.
Fair enough. Okay, we'll try and lighten it up a little bit. I've got one of my favourite questions. Question 42. What is the meaning of life?
Well, that song's stuck in my head now. So long and thanks for all the fish. Yeah, sorry. I've just got a little mental image of a little robot telling me there isn't one. Sorry, character's just totally gone. I should point out this drink was up there when I started. Like when we first started recording.
When we first started, yeah. Oh, jeez. I knew you were going to need another one anyway, so...
Yeah, I know I'm going to need another one. But okay, so to live the life God gave you, and to live the life God wants you to live, and if God calls you to do something, to do it. Like everyone's got a vocation. Like some people are going to be nuns or priests, and some people are born to be parents, and some people are born to maybe be missionaries or some people are born to be writers or singers or teachers or nurses, doctors, anything like that. And if that's what God calls you to do, that's what you should do with your life.
Very cool. So, follow that inner voice.
Yeah, follow God.
Are there any things that you would want to do that you see other people are able to do, but you're not allowed, or you're, not, influenced not to? I'm not sure how to ask this question properly, actually.
I always want bacon on Good Friday, but that's just because I can't have it. I can have it every other day of the year. For some reason, I always want bacon on Good Friday. I think it's a thing. And whatever I've decided I'm giving up for Lent, I always want it more, like on Monday, Thursday. But that's it. That's God testing you, isn't it? So, other than that, there's not really much that we can't do. I mean, I suppose you wouldn't get a tattoo, but that's not really a big rule. That's just I think that's more cultural than anything else.
Very cool.
And I still I know the history of it, and I kind of think the Protestants have got a point that priests should be allowed to get married. It's the only thing I think they've really got a point on, but priests getting married, I don't see what the problem with that would be. I think it would probably be better.
I definitely agree with you there, actually. For a few reasons, probably.
Yeah, I mean, the main one is most people go to their priest for advice about their wedding or their kids or their family. How's a priest supposed to give you advice if he doesn't know any of it, if he's never lived it?
Yeah, doesn't have the experience.
Yeah, and I kind of, at that point, you've got to hope God gives him the right answer to pass on to you. So
isn't that what most would do? They go to the Bible, give spiritual counsel from the scriptures.
I think as a Catholic, I'd probably go to my priest before I turn to my Bible. I'd probably go to my priest first.
No, but I was saying, wouldn't that be where their advice comes from? They would be referencing,
probably.
The Bible. I'd hope so.
The Bible, the Catechism, papal edicts. I'm going to break character to say this. My growing up, we were strong papists because John Paul was on the papal seat, and he was Polish, and my dad's Polish. So, yeah, we were well papist. I mean, no pictures of the guy up in the house, but only just, I think.
Very cool.
So I was very staunchly.
That being papist references the reverence for the Pope?
Oh, yeah. Like the Pope was the ultimate voice of God on earth.
Yeah.
What the Pope said went. Like John Paul could have. I don't think there's anything John Paul could have said before I was about 12 years old that I'd have looked at and gone, no, he's wrong. He was. Even now, as an ex-Catholic, I look at it and I go, he's my Pope. He was my Pope.
That's fair enough, yeah. That makes sense, though.
Because of all the history behind him getting into the papacy and everything else. But he was my Pope. Yeah. And I think a lot of it coincided. I don't know if correlation might not equal causation, but it might have had an impact. I think I started to lose my faith when John Paul died and Benedict took over. Although that might have been a lot of what was coming out of Benedict's mouth as well.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Which I'm sure we'll get to. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Okay, cool. Alrighty. We'll jump back in if you're ready. Has there been a time where something gave you a particular doubt and about your faith, and if so, what was it?
Kind of a personal one, but my mum's really been ill all my life, and I always kind of wonder why God would put her through that and put me through having to watch her go through that. And I kind of wonder about that, and I pray that maybe he'll make it better sometimes. But I don't know best, and I see how bad it is, and I hope there's a reason. And that's my big doubt of why would God do that to my mum. My mum's really great, and I love my mum. So to see her hurting hurts.
Of course. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to take it to that place.
No, but that was my big doubt growing up. That was my big one.
That's definitely understandable.
That was the one that, yeah. So it's the truth. I'm just gonna have a drink for that one.
That's fair enough. Is this still something that's ongoing, or is it long?
My mum passed away My mum passed away, so.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thanks. It's a few years ago now, but still hurts.
Of course, yeah.
But I spent a lot of years questioning why that was allowed to happen before I decided that. Yeah,
that'd be for me, especially if I hadn't already found my way out. That would be something. Even before, like my parents are fine, but the concept, the thought of them, that would be well enough. I knew that I'd be questioning everything.
Yeah, I mean, to put it into context, my mum was ill all my life, with quite complications from diabetes and some other illnesses.
Yeah.
And was in and out of hospital all my life. I remember doing my homework as a kid, primary school age, by her hospital bed and the nurses helping me. I think I was 7 the first time I saw her crash, and they had to bring her back. And I remember they pulled me out, pulled the curtain around, and my dad was talking to the nurse panicking, and I ran back to where my mum's bed was, and I saw them performing crash on my mum. I looked around the curtain, and they didn't see me, and I just stood there. And then I ran back to my dad because I couldn't look. I was like, what's going on? I don't understand what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I was 7. So from a young age, I had those doubts of what God would let my mum go through that. That's not fair. So that was just a big thing in general for me growing up all the time. But I had a lot of teachers and people who would say, oh, it's for the best. It's to teach you to be a good person. It's to teach you to understand, or maybe your mum's, maybe it's something to do with your mum, and it's something you have to learn to deal with. And God wouldn't give you anything you couldn't cope with. Which is a great meme. I love the meme that goes around that says, God gives you only what you can manage, or whatever the wording is. Because in that case, God thinks I am a bona fide badass, and I have been since I was 5 years old. Fact. Just, yeah, fact.
Yeah.
Pretty much. So yeah, that was that one. Out of character completely, but explain.
There's something, I'm probably not going to describe this correctly because it has been a while since I've seen it. It was some sort of meme, like saying the same thing. He doesn't put you through any challenge you can't overcome or whatever. And like, okay, well, what about all the people dying, around the world? Like, I'm pretty sure they can't overcome their challenges, whether it be in war zones or, poverty or all these different, things that people are just outright dying in the streets and no one's there to help. No one's there to care, or like, it's nothing like what we know of life. And, I don't know about God really giving a shit about them. They're not opportunities that they can, challenges, that they can overcome.
Yeah, no, the favourite one was always with me. God's testing you. God wants to see what you can do. God wants to see what you can cope with. Well, if God feels the need to test a 5, 6, 7-year-old with those things, and to test my poor mother with the hell she went through in her life, God's a world-class prick. Just, if he exists, he's a world-class prick, and I feel no compunction in telling him so. I will tell him to his face and raise a glass to confirm it.
Cheers.
Cheers to that.
All right, you ready
but yeah,
to jump back in?
next question. Yep, cool.
All right. So, have you ever tried to convert somebody into your religion or bring someone into the church?
I haven't. No, that's not my thing. I don't know enough, and that's not what I'm made for. I don't think.
Very cool. You're saying everyone has a different calling and stuff.
Yeah, and calling people to religion's not mine at all. I mean, if I'm going to mass and I'm with someone, I'll invite them along, kind of thing. But I'll never. I don't know enough to start answering people's questions and telling them things. That's not my calling. I don't know what my calling is, but it's not that.
Well, that's fair enough. Okay, so in general, what would you say your view on atheists would be?
I kind of feel sorry for them. I mean, when I think of atheists, I think of people who've actively chosen not to believe in God. And because that's what an atheist is, right? And if they've chosen that, what are they hiding from? Or what don't they want to face in God that they would do something like that? To just outright say there is no God. Like, how could you even possibly know that? And what if you're wrong? It's so misguided. I kind of pity them a little bit.
Fair enough.
Yeah, sorry, I can't. Sorry. Yeah, I didn't even know properly what an atheist was at that age. Quite clearly, from what I've just said, I had no idea what an atheist was. And my idea of an atheist was someone who said, no, categorically, there is no God. Because that's what I was told an atheist was. Which is completely illogical. Because saying there is no God is like saying there absolutely is a God. You prove it. So yeah, anyway, I'll have a drink and then we'll go back into character.
Yeah. All right, well, while we're on it, what about other religions? How do they treat or feel about other religions, be it Christianities or not?
I kind of, they're okay, I guess. I don't really know much about them, but there's that quote from Jesus, in my Father's house there are many rooms. So if people are living their life in the right way, but they haven't had chance to find God, so maybe they were born in a Muslim country or before Jesus came or something like that, where they haven't had the chance to find God as we know God, then God's not going to hold that against them as long as they've lived the best life they knew with what they had.
That's pretty sweet. I'll admit, I don't think I've actually heard that line. Well, in God's house there are many rooms, was it?
Yeah, in my Father's house there are many rooms. It's from, I think it's in Mark, it might also be in Luke. It's a quote from Jesus when someone asks about it, and he does say that's the exact quote, in my Father's house there are many rooms.
Yeah, no, that's nice. I don't know, maybe I've probably just forgotten because it's been so long, but that's actually, yeah, I get it. Like, once you said it, I was like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. That's pretty cool. It's a good one, though.
That one is one of the few sort of, any Christian who says that, we've got something in common. I can talk to you.
Yeah.
If you're starting from that point of view, regardless of what you think, I can talk to you. We've got a common ground, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All right. Well, what about, if you know what they are, what about apostates? People who actually actively speak out against the Catholic Church.
Oh, yeah, they're not good people. I mean, it's not for me to judge, and I hope that they'll come back to God, but it's not for me to. They're not good people. If you're speaking out against God and the church, I mean, why would you want to speak out against the truth? I'm sorry. Again, I can't. I'm an apostate now, and I just can't. I'm sorry. I can't. For clarification, anyone who doesn't know me, I've gone from Catholic to pagan. I'm the worst sort of apostate. I've gone from monotheist to polytheist. And I am pretty anti-monotheist. And the idea that there was every time in my life when I would have gone, that person is evil, that person is going to hell. I'm just... I was an evil little child. Give me some holy water, quick, I need to splash old pictures of myself.
It's a good exercise in realizing these things, and it helps other people too, to, you know, even if they're not as far along the journey as us.
I'm not even entirely sure half the things I'm saying are Catholic teachings, though. I just think they're things I've filled in the gaps on, or someone told me once and I internalized.
Well, isn't that a lot of what Christians do, just in general? You know, they don't understand or they don't actually research a lot of stuff, and they just fill in the gaps with their own imagination.
Yeah, it's like, I've got friends who are Catholic now, and they are well-read, well understood, and they are my friends. They are actively my friends. They are people I talk to and enjoy the company of and respect and love, and, you know, and I like to think that's reciprocal. So the thought of them having attitudes like the kind of thing I'm saying now is just sort of, ooh, am I sure I was raised Catholic, or was I just raised in some weird cult thing? Like, by people who, you know, I can't... I've had Catholics say to me, like, the stuff you were taught is just completely out of whack. Like, what even? Like, they go full no true Scotsman on me, and they're just like, no, that's not Catholicism. Or that's really, really old-fashioned Catholicism that doesn't apply anymore.
That's
so I was raised in a really old-fashioned church.
I get a lot of the stuff I think of as being a Jehovah's Witness is so outdated. For a lot of people who are currently still, it's almost unrecognizable, and so you get a lot of that, like, in that respect, and it's frustrating. But, like, I kind of understand it for the younger generation, but the older generation that denies it, that's what annoys me.
No, I know what I was raised into. It's just, I talk to Catholics now and they'll say, that's not what that means. And I'm just like, well, that's what I was told.
Yeah.
So, you know.
All right. Ready to jump back in?
Anyway, yep.
Let's move on to science. In general, what do you think of science? Like, you mentioned that your school was quite scientific or literate.
And science is science. Science is the truth, but just because it's science and it's maths and it's, you know, atoms and particles and biology, chemistry, all that, doesn't mean God didn't start it all. You can be a scientist and still believe in God. The two things that aren't in opposition.
So you'd say there isn't many places where your religion conflict with science?
Not as far as I know. Like, you know, to give an example, we've got the Big Bang Theory in science.
Yeah.
So if you go back, the world was like, you know, and the went like this. Well, God said, let there be light, and the world went like this. That's the same thing. It's just that science is talking about how it was done, and religion is the why and the reasoning and the higher level emotional stuff behind it. Whereas religion gives a reason for the Big Bang. Science gives an explanation of how the Big Bang happened. The two things go together. They're not designed to be separate. Science, all science is trying to understand the creations of God. That's how I'd look at it.
That's understandable. So would you say God is omniscient? So he knows all things, future, past, your thoughts in your heart, all that?
Yeah, I don't see why not. God knows all, even if we don't.
So is is everything sort of part of his plan? Like, he has it all planned out ahead for us.
So God has, you know how I said earlier about how everyone has a vocation?
Mm.
So God has a plan for you. God knows the destination. But he's kind of, it's like he's given you a map. And he said, okay, you need to get to here. But there's maybe like 100 roads in the way. And you could make, say, 500 different routes to get to the same place.
Yeah.
And whichever one you take, you'll still get there. He knows you're going to get there. But how you get there, that's up to you.
Okay. So he doesn't necessarily predetermine every little step. He just sort of goes, this is where you'll end up.
Yeah, this is a nudge in the right direction. God knows if you're going to, for example, grow up and become a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
But God might know how you're going to do that, but he's leaving it open to you to do it in your way.
So
and,
this go for
and to decide
everybody.
whether you want to do that or not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Decide whether you want to do that or not. Everyone's got the choice on whether they want to follow their vocation or whether they want to do the thing God calls them to do or not. And that's what free will is. And you choose whether you want to do that, whether you want to follow the path God laid for you or not. And the only thing I can say is God help you if you choose not to.
So what about some of the atrocities that we look back into history and we call atrocities that were following God's directive in their mind? Things like a real big one would be the Inquisitions. Was the Inquisitions? Spanish Inquisition? They were Catholic. Yeah, that's right. They were trying to convert them.
Okay, so the Spanish Inquisition. Okay. So there's a great quote and I love it. I think it's brilliant. It says, the Bible did not come by facts from heaven. So these people were reading the Bible, and maybe because it was the time of where they were or something about it, they didn't understand it properly, or there was something they missed. And that led them down a wrong path. Or maybe they applied their own reading to it when they really shouldn't have, or something else happened, and they didn't understand. And that lack of understanding is what caused it. And I'm not going to blame the devil, because I think that's a bit of a cop-out. Everyone's responsible for their own behaviour. But I think you can account for... You've got to account for the context people live in. So the way we understand the Bible now is not the way they understood it 200 years ago, or 500 years ago, or 800 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Because understanding is growing all the time. And we come at different things, and everyone comes to it with different experiences and understanding. And the trick with the Bible is to take what you can, but to really try and understand, and to not take a wrong message from it by misreading something or emphasizing one thing over another.
So ultimately, did they not get to their end goal that God had planned for them? Did they deviate?
That's not for me to say. I don't know what God's plan for them was. There might have been a reason for the Spanish Inquisition that we can't understand as humans, that God needed to happen for some reason. I don't know.
Okay. Fair enough.
Wow. All the logical fallacies. All of them. There's so many logical fallacies. I can't.
We're actually pretty close
and
now.
Then just,
we're a couple questions left.
Cool. And then just copping out when I don't know the answer, and God knows. Let God deal with it. Wow.
Oh, you're doing well. Okay. Alrighty. You up for another one?
Yep.
So, would you say, do you think you have any particular political opinions, or are you influenced at all by your church in any way to have any take a political side on anything? In some churches, their pastors or priests, some of them will maybe some, instruct vote for this person, or some will go, they'll push the idea behind certain policy that's being proposed to influence people. Is anything like that?
I hear that the American churches do this. No, if a priest ever told me how to vote, I would just, wow. I'd probably write to the bishop and report them. That's
Fair
mad.
Call. I can respect that as an answer.
That's totally mad.
So, that being said, I suppose they don't have too much influence on your political opinions in general. What would the consensus be on like equal rights of LGBTQ and gay marriage, for example? Are they pro-gay marriage?
I mean, the official line is kind of, the Americans had this thing of don't ask, don't tell. That's kind of the official Catholic line, as far as I know. And that, like, gay men and stuff are called to be celibate. And that's something they're called to do. Me personally, I kind of, you're not hurting anyone as long as it's safe and legal, and, keep it to yourself. Don't go waving it in people's faces. Have at it, that's your business. It's no one else's. Just like a man and a woman, it's not really anyone else's business. So, and that's between you and God. That's nothing to do with me. And live and let live, kind of. Yeah.
So if an openly gay married couple came into church and wanted to be in mass every Sunday or whatever, would that be something that no one would bat an eyelid? Like, it'd be perfectly fine?
I mean, I think there'd be a few whispers, but it's not like the snogging in the back pew, is it? So just leave them be.
Would they be allowed to hold hands?
I don't see why not. If a married couple walks in, a man and a woman walks in and does it, I don't see why not. I'm saying this is the official Catholic line. That's just what I think.
That's fair.
I'm kind of, I find it quite weird that we would tell gay men that you can't have sex, or lesbians that you can't have sex. Like, it's kind of a human nature thing. But, as long as everything's private, everyone's legal, there's no sort of kids involved or any nastiness, anything like that. That's between you and God. That's nothing to do with me, and I wish you all happiness and luck and love in the world.
That is actually very forward-thinking of you.
It was at the time as well. I was bullied horrendously from that point of view.
Well, that's good for you to stuck to your guns on it, though. That's pretty solid. Good on you. Okay, what about things like women's rights? You got equal pay in the workforce and things like that. Are you generally pro-women's rights?
I mean, if God calls a woman to be a career woman, who are we to tell her she should be paid less for it?
Fair call.
That's the job she wants to do, and that's what she's called to do.
Does this go for the medical field as well? Like, so let's say a woman wants to have an abortion. Is that between her and her God?
Yeah. I'm very strongly, I think, and this is something I get a lot of stick for at school. I think, as long as it's legal, it's safe, and she's made the proper decision and she's thought about it, and she knows it's what she wants to do, that's between her and God. She's the one who's got to live with the consequences either way, so it should be her decision. I would always encourage her not to, because, life is sacred. But that's not a decision I can make for anyone else, not a decision I would hope anyone would ever try and make for me.
That's also a very forward-thinking point of view.
Cheers, that's another one I was actually bullied for in school, by the teachers.
Good on you. All right, this is going to be the last question, or last topic anyway. What about the death penalty? Do you have any particular opinion on the death penalty?
I actually think some things are unforgivable and probably deserve. I mean, everyone always says, if you could travel in time, what would you do? Well, yes, I would go back and kill Hitler. That's the thing I would do.
Cool.
some people don't deserve to live, don't deserve to be around normal, decent human beings. And does that make me a bad person to think that? Probably. But again, I'm not God, I'm not perfect. So I know it's probably not right that I think that, but that's what I think.
Fair call. And so I suppose then following that would be where, God has to kill people like before we had the firstborns, and that's justified.
Some people are, I think, irredeemable, and I think if God makes that call, God knows better than I do.
Oh,
did I just say that out loud?
Did
I just actually say that out loud? Wow.
You did.
It's okay for God to commit genocide if he fancies a go. Wow. I need a drink.
Oh, lucky for you, that was the end. You can no longer need to be your old self.
Cool. Wow.
So
some of those questions, yeah, wow.
How do you feel?
Confused. Horrified. Largely, I'm worried about how my parents didn't realise I was such a vicious little bitch.
Well,
and such an unthinking, unfeeling, unempathetic little bitch. Because seriously, some of the things I was saying. And like I said, I know Catholics who would probably stringently disagree with some of the things I was saying, but that's what I genuinely believed. And
yeah.
Wow.
I can relate, like things that, and I mean, and this is why a lot of the time you'll come across, I'll come across my parents saying something that I'm just like, that's really questionable, but I just, that's the norm, that's the reality for them. And it was for me back in the day, so yeah, it's not, in those circumstances there, it was normal. Like that wasn't a bad thing. That was part of the deal, So I assume a lot of things have changed since then, especially, I suppose, for example, maybe not so much on the political opinions that we just discussed, because they seemed pretty solid for the most part. But I'm sure you're even more open to such things now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, absolutely. If anyone claiming to be a religious authority told me how to vote, I'd tell them how to go whistle. I just would. No one tells me how to vote. I vote according to my conscience and my decisions. Does my religion influence that? Because being pagan now, polytheist, probably yes. Like, I'm not going to vote for someone who would, who is like uber monotheist, hardcore religious, or I'm not going to vote for someone who's, wants to murder poor people or anything like that, because my religion influences my morals, as it should. But equally, if someone says to me, you must vote this way, it's a secret ballot, on your jog. Go fill out your own. Leave me to mine. Yep. I'm very... in my own way, I think politics is kind of my secondary religion, because I very strongly, ardently believe in the political process. Even when it fails, I think it fails because of the people who are taking part in it, not necessarily the process itself. So I think, if more people voted and more people got out and paid attention, the world would be a much better place.
I agree.
And I'm a strong believer in sort of democratic process. So the idea of someone else telling me to vote is just like, what even? Like, my husband, Ring. One Ring has a channel too. I'll plug him there.
Not a problem.
I imagine his family are evangelical Christians, and he was raised evangelical Christian. And I don't know if he ever had a pastor or anyone tell him to vote, but the idea of someone doing that to me horrifies me. Like, no. Yeah,
See, as a
you know about God, you don't know about the House of Commons. Let's just draw a line under
as a
that.
J-Dub, one of the more common things for us, at least in the time, was that they discouraged us from voting. Even where here it's compulsory, we're still discouraged from voting. So they don't necessarily tell you to vote for somebody or a particular topic. They're just like, don't vote. Don't be a part of their system, basically.
Also, voting is part of the worldly. It's a worldly thing.
Yes, and if we are to vote, you're to vote for Jesus as king.
Is Jesus running for election? I don't know there are any Mexicans in my local election.
Jesus, it depends. I'm sure there's a
I say
Jesus
that because it's a
somewhere
common
running.
Mexican name, but you know what I mean.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, South Americans.
So, hey, looking back on your old self, and I know you did mention just before that, what a bitch you were, but do you have any regrets about the person you used to be?
I mean, I was a child. We're talking about when I was 12, 13 years old at most.
Mm-hmm.
The final nail in the coffin of my sort of religious deconversion was the Christmas Pope Benedict stood up and said that LGBT people were a greater threat to the world than global warming.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
about 13 and I was just coming to terms with being LGBT myself. So that was like, wow, I don't belong in this church anymore. John Paul had just died. It was his first Christmas speech. And I went from being uber papist to who is this pretender? Like, if someone had stood up and challenged Benedict for the papal seat at that point, I would have probably backed them because he just seemed like he wasn't that wasn't the Pope I knew. John Paul, as far as I knew, didn't say things like that. He might have thought them, but he didn't outright say them, and especially not on Christmas Day, on one of the most important days in the Christian calendar. To come out with something like that, like, leave the politics alone and just focus on the religion. That's what you're there for. And again, it's that whole stay in your lane thing that Benedict kind of didn't have a handle on in the way I got the impression John Paul did as a kid.
Cool.
So I was a kid, and looking back on it, you can tell I was a kid. A lot of the things I was saying are probably gaps I filled in myself or guesswork that I'd made. I did actually read the whole of the New Testament, like the New Testament and Psalms, the little red one. They gave us it at school, and I read it in the space of about a week. Because I was just an avid reader and I'd read anything. But again, it was very, I kind of, if there was ever a time in my life when I would say it was probably best that I thought in that way, it would be when I was a child before I could do any real damage. No one is listening to a 12-year-old tell them these things. No one is taking to heart what I had to say as a 12-year-old. So I'm not doing major damage to anyone else. And if I am, it's other 12-year-olds who are going home and talking to adults who are hopefully putting some sense into them. And I grew out of it, in the same way I grew out of the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus. I grew out of it. And for a long time, for me, it was a coping mechanism with everything that was going on in my life. Until, the coping mechanism suddenly didn't work because I realised, promises I've been made aren't being kept. And that was the other nail in the coffin for me was I was promised, if you pray enough, if you're good enough, if you're devout enough, God will cure you. God will cure your mum. God will look after you. It just never happened. So you kind of get to the point where you're like, it's like the Job story, isn't it? It's, but I got to the point where I was just like, dude, screw you. If you're not going to sort this out, I'm not going to waste any more time on you. I've got other things to do. So
that's fair call.
That was me. Yeah.
If you could go back and tell yourself something to help you get out sooner, what would you say?
What would I say to myself when I was in deep? I would go back to myself and I would say, God ain't listening. stop wasting time and spend it with your mum instead. Stop wasting time on religion and all the rest of it and start focusing on your mum. And that would have pulled me out because my mum was my priority growing up. That would have been the thing that pulled me out. If someone said to me, God ain't looking after your mum, that's your job. That would have pulled me clean out straight away. But that would have been a lot to put on a child of that age as well.
So it's pretty much, yeah, but it's the opposite to what you were being told by them, which is if you do enough praying and be good enough, and, you know, then it'll fix her.
Yeah.
Which is
if I'm good enough,
if you ask me.
Yeah, no, if I wash up enough at home, or if I'm good enough in school, if I get good enough grades and I pray enough and I, you know, sing well enough at mass and I do this and do that, my mum will get better. Well, no, that's not how life works. No. And what I really needed was someone to sit down and say to me, there's nothing you can do about this. All you can do is try and be a good daughter and look after your mum. That's all you can do. And whether you choose to do that by praying or not, that's what you need to do. And no one ever said that to me, because it almost feels like growing up, they saw the opportunity and they saw the vulnerability in me and that, and kind of used it. And I hate to say that because they were good people in their own way. But it does kind of feel like that was used to control me a little bit. Which is,
yeah,
you know.
that makes sense.
And the funny thing is, it was never my parents who used it in that way. Never. My mum never said, oh, I'll get better if you do this, this, and this. My mum never did that. My mum never put that on me. My dad never put that on me. It was the school, entirely the school.
That's not a way to treat a child. No, sorry that we're ending on a bit of a blue note, but that's pretty much the end of the show. Did you want to give everyone a shout of where to find you and what you do and all that cool jazz?
Cool. I will say, I'm a classicist and a historian. So a lot of the things I thought when I was 12 years old, I know are not true. So please don't judge me on them. And to find out more about what I think, don't at me. You can find out more about what I think now on my Twitter at Danger Hissy. When I get round to starting to put videos out on my YouTube channel at Hissy's Hideaway. I appear on streams all over the place, but I've got a playlist on Hissy's Hideaway with everything there. I'm going through the Asterix books with Godless Scummer every Sunday, one every Sunday, and this week we're doing Asterisk and Cleopatra on Scummer's channel on Sunday, so check that out. My husband is One Ring, who does Media Musings, who does Dungeons and Divinity. He does all kinds of stuff. My husband's, I can't keep up with him. He does all kinds of things. He's brilliant. I love him.
He's awesome.
He's awesome. So check him out too. But mostly I'm on Twitter because I rant a lot. I also currently have a blog ongoing about the current situation, my thoughts on it. I tend to update it once a week because there's not much to say. When you're stuck inside and not doing anything, there's not much to talk about. But I'm trying. So there's that. And I also write fan fiction. If you find me anywhere, it will be Hissy the Danger Noodle. I write strongly, usually fairly explicit / fan fiction in the Harry Potter fandom. Snarry is my OTP. Do not at me. I will fight you. I will fight you. I've done it. I survived the Tumblr wars. I used to be in the Supernatural fandom and I survived those wars on Tumblr. Do not at me about that. But if you do find my fan fictions and you enjoy, there's a link on my Twitter. Dead Dove Do Not Eat. Please heed the warnings. Please heed the tags. They're there for a reason. I will always try and actively tag trigger warnings and stuff. So I don't want to trigger anyone, but they're there. So please pay attention if you do find them. And that's pretty much me.
Yeah, cool. Thank you very much. It should have at least your YouTube channel or Twitter, depending on which one I find and go with, linked below. So check that out. You'll be able to should be able to find pretty much everything else. Thank you very much for joining me, Hissy. And
thank you for having me. Much appreciated. A good excuse to have a drink on a Friday night. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching. I hope you do all the good things, click all the buttons, and we'll catch you next time. Have you ever imagined sleeping with your own upside-down nacho? Do you wish you could grab a long-haired Australian and drink alcohol from their body? Maybe you're more interested in sitting on your imaginary underworld apostate's face, or just stomp me to the curb for writing such horrendous lines. Nachos go great with beer. Now you can and more with these fantastic overpriced items from the great range on sale in Nacho's Underworld Market. Your nachos are always best with beer. Pick up your very own upside-down pillow, throw an apostate on your stretch pants, or slap on some yowie socks and just walk all over me. Your nachos always go best with beer. So grab Australian mug, wrap your lips around it, and suck dry those glorious liquids. Everything in stock is limited because I get bored and change it up all the time, so get yours now. As always, ensure to thoroughly beer your nacho. Go to teesprings.com/store/nachos Underworld Market to grab your very own nacho now.
I believe in Jah, I believe